Hey there everyone, AJ back again for the Mighty Gluestick channel. I make videos about Dungeons & Dragons lore with a truly mighty catalogue of videos on my channel, including monster ecologies, outer planes, magic items and exotic locations, greatly expanding on the information you may already know about the various worlds of D&D. If you like what I do, please consider becoming a member of the channel by clicking the join button below or backing me on Patreon, where you can get access to all of the scripts I write for these vids, and of course subscribing to me here as I upload at least twice a week. Members do get to request topics for me to cover, and today's video is one of them. Delving back into the Book of Artifacts, published by TSR in 1993, designed primarily by David Zeb Cook, with some additional design by Rich Baker, who co-designed the Birthright D&D setting, Wolfgang Bauer of Kobold Press, Bill Connors, who is basically the father of Ravenloft, Colin McComb and Dale Slade Henson, who created Planescape, Thomas M. Reed, former creative director of TSR, as well as David Wise and Steve and Glenda Burns. It is a magnificent book, and today we are talking about the Iron Flask, the original Iron Flask. The Iron Flask of Tuerny the Merciless is a heavy urn stoppered with a turnip-shaped plug. It is small enough to be carried in the palm of one hand. The urn itself is quite plain, but the heavily engraved stopper is embossed with runes of power. In essence, the flask is like a genie bottle, but it has demons inside it. I'll quote directly from the book as it talks about the history of the artifact. In all human history, only one man has epitomized the essence of pure evil, Tuerny the Merciless. Tuerny was a powerful mage who served as counselor to the king of a small country. Feeling that the king was weak and a foolish leader, Tuerny and his agents murdered the royal family as they slept and seized the crown for himself. Using his vast magical powers, Tuerny charmed or enslaved most of the army. He was able to summon foul Tuerny demons and set them loose on the helpless people, but had little control over them. So Tuerny began expending vast amounts of energy to craft a single device capable of bending them to his will. With all in readiness, he summoned forth a great Tuerny, took control over the beast, and imprisoned it in the flask. Meanwhile, news of Tuerny's atrocities reached neighbouring kingdoms. They raised great armies to crush Tuerny and his foul minions. These devastating wars lasted for years, but resolved nothing. Finally, Tuerny, undefeated, opened the bottle, only to have the released creature grab him. A blood-curdling scream filled the air as Tuerny transformed into a foul and hideous monster and vanished, along with the flask and the creature. I have many questions about that story. First, Tuerny was the leader of a group that took control of the kingdom, so there could quite well be a legacy of this group operating in the world of Oerth right now, one who had access to very dark and powerful knowledge of diabolism, the summoning and control of fiends and demons of the lower planes, and the infinite chaos of the abyss. In fact, Thay and Halruaa have a legacy of circle magic, which, if you're interested about Thay, you can have a look at the video that I made on that place in its history. It says that Tuerny summoned many demons and just let them loose on the world. So where did all these immortal demons that he could not control wind up? There could be dozens of them still on the world or elsewhere, who were originally transported to the prime material plane by Tuerny. When he summoned and imprisoned a powerful Tuerny, I would assume this to be either a very strong Balor or even a minor demon lord. But how cool would it be to tie this into the tale of Urtu or Altab of the Forgotten Realms lore, forming yet another connection between Greyhawk and Faerun? And why did Tuerny eventually open the flask and release the demon? Did he believe his subsequent transformation was a path to immortality? Well, in a way it was, as we shall discover. This is a very dangerous artifact. Player characters who attempt to use it with no knowledge of what they are dealing with are in for a very bad time. It is most certainly cursed. The use of the artifact by anyone puts them at risk of activating the curse each time. The more they use it, the more certain it is that the curse will take hold. Also, the artifact is one of the many that will gradually change the user's alignment to chaotic evil in this case. How long this takes can vary depending on if it is a non-player character or not, and really depends on the dungeon master and what's happening in the game. There is a cumulative 5% chance each time the flask is used that the Tuerny it controls will be able to turn on the user. When this happens, the user is taken to the Tuerny's home plane, where their tarnished soul is torn from their mortal body and transformed into a miserable dretch, doomed to serve them in perpetuity. The gradual transformation of the user's alignment to chaotic evil also carries with it an overwhelming desire, a compulsion to utterly conquer and destroy all known creation, essentially turning the user into a demon in mortal form, even without them being dragged back to the abyss and turned into a wretched demon toady. What power could be worth that risk, you might ask? Well, along with the power to summon the imprisoned demon from the flask and command it, the Iron Flask also conveys two other purely offensive powers, much coveted by people who like collecting artifacts, randomly determined or selected from a table at the end of the Book of Artifacts. There are 20 possible powers on that table, many of which mimic well-known spells, such as Bigby's Hand, Chain Lightning, Fireball, any of the power word spells, Disintegration, Shape Change, and so on. Many of the spells, they're no longer listed in 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons, but can be substituted easily enough. Other offensive powers enable the user to reflect any damage that they receive in combat back at whatever creature was trying to harm them, or to instantly age a target creature. Most of the powers can be used at least once per day. Some of them need to recharge for a week before they can be used again. The main power of the flask, though, is the control of the demon trapped within. Once per day, the user of the flask draws upon the power of one of the following Tuerny imprisoned inside it: a Glabrizu, a Nabazu, a Merciless, or a Nelfeshni. The actual Tuerny contained in the flask can be determined randomly or selected by the Dungeon Master. It can be released to wreak havoc on any targets the user chooses for up to 8 hours. If it's killed, it instantly returns back inside the artifact. The fiend must otherwise be commanded to kill at least once before it can be ordered back into the flask. If this is not done before the 8 hours expire, the demon is freed of the artifact's control and the dreaded effects of the curse are instantly manifested. Typically, the transformation into a dretch and being dragged back to the abyss is a pretty dramatic affair, and the demon has no problem letting everyone know this is what happens when one tries to control a demon kind or toy with the power of the abyss. The book suggests that just randomly dropping this artifact into a campaign is a recipe for disaster at your gaming table. However, crafting a plot line where the player characters either seek out the item for a specific purpose not related to its actual use, or to have them preventing others from acquiring it, is a pretty good method. Perhaps they must find a way to prevent an otherwise good ruler from using the power of the flask to change the tide of a desperate war. Perhaps they're being misled by some sort of evil wizard or scryed, or being influenced somehow by demonic powers, or perhaps it can be used to both bribe and eventually doom some evil and greedy power who has been like a plague on a benevolent society. The player characters might find out about the Iron Flask from the increased incidence of demonic assassinations, or from there being demons on the loose that point to some single source of their origin. The other option uses the lesser magic item, still a legendary magic item mind you, called the Iron Flask. You can find this in the free rules in the D&D Beyond website. I'll go over its details a little bit. It is clearly inspired by the original artifacts. Perhaps these were created in an attempt to replicate the original Iron Flask. I'll call them lesser Iron Flasks just to avoid confusion. They are instantly distinguishable or separate from the original Iron Flask by the small non-engraved brass stopper at the top of the bottle, which differs quite a lot from the original Iron Flask. It also has a chain attached to it for ease of carrying it. You can use an action to speak the flask's command word, targeting a creature that you can see within 60 feet of you. If the target is native to the plane of existence other than the one you're on, the target must succeed on a DC 17 Wisdom saving throw or be trapped in the flask. If the target has been trapped in the flask before, it has advantage on the saving throw. Once trapped, the creature remains in the flask until released. The flask can only hold one creature at a time. A creature trapped in the flask doesn't need to breathe, eat, or drink, and doesn't age. So it's actually an effective method of preserving a wizard if they're ever in dire straits. They can trap themselves in the flask, willingly failing the saving throw. Unfortunately, they have to rely on somebody finding the flask afterwards and letting them go. You can also use an action to remove the flask stopper and release the target, the creature the flask contains. The creature is friendly to you and your companions for 1 hour and obeys your commands for that duration. This is a magical compulsion. If you give no commands or give it the command that is likely to result in its death, it defends itself but otherwise takes no actions. At the end of the duration, the creature acts in accordance with its normal disposition and alignment. An identify spell reveals that a creature is inside the flask, but the only way to determine the type of creature is to open the flask. A newly discovered bottle might already contain a creature chosen by the DM or determined randomly. And there's a table that you can roll with a 50% chance the Iron Flask contains one of 29 different types of creatures, including Jinn, Solars, various Yugoloths, and of course demons. In order to completely destroy the original Iron Flask of Tuerny the Merciless, the user must either imprison 99 other great Tuerny in the flask, or It must be filled with the tears of 1,000 orphaned children, which melts it, or the flask must be filled with dirt from every battlefield Tuerny fought on. I'll be talking soon about general artifact lore, recharging magic items, item creation, and the special powers of artifacts in a future video. Thanks to everyone who let me know that that is what you would like to see. Please hit the like button if you made it this far, subscribe if you like what I do, check out my Patreon for some exclusive content, all the full scripts for these videos, buy some merchandise, wear your geek with pride, and as always, thanks for listening, and I'll be back with more for you very soon.